Well, hello, my friends. It is Tuesday, which means it's time for another Expert Momentum. Thanks to all of you who shared and liked this and are helping get the word out about this show. And really my intention for those of you who watch this consistently is that really I'm trying to give you the type of content that you would typically pay for. This would be the type of stuff that you would buy in programs. In fact, a lot of the content that we're teaching here I know has been taught in workshops that people paid as much as $10,000 to $15,000 to sit in. So I want you to have that information. I want you to be able to use that information. And today we're going to talk about one of the things that can be one of my favorite aspects of working with somebody and working with a business, but can also be one of the most frustrating and annoying and difficult pieces of this process, which is your presentation, i.e. your PowerPoint. And I'm going to use those words interchangeably. I know some of you might not use PowerPoint, or you might use something other than PowerPoint. You might use Keynote, you might use Google Slides, you might use whatever. All of those things are totally okay. It doesn't matter what is what. This also came from suggestions from our audience, which I appreciate that. So if any of you have content, you want me to deepen something you've seen on previous episodes, you want to know more about something specific as it comes to being a successful speaker and expert, I know coming up in the upcoming weeks, we're going to talk about program launches, we're going to talk about developing programs, we're going to talk about courses. I definitely want to talk some more about webinars. I have great friends who do that, like Ellen, who I've had as a guest on before. I definitely want to start bringing some guests on this. I haven't focused on that as much because I had a lot of content that I wanted to get through myself. And so I've been organizing that and pulling that together. But as always, this is Facebook Live. This isn't just Ken Talks at you. So if you have comments, let me know that you're here and you're watching. Even if you're not here live, I still respond to the comments. If you go back into the previous episodes, you'll see that I'm always doing that I'm always responsive, and definitely want to cover the areas that make the most sense for you. And as always, before I get too deep into this, a lot of what you need to have organized for your PowerPoint presentation, for your events, for your courses, I have that URL that's always up on the screen down there, exploremomentum.com/preview. If you don't have my perfect preview organizer, make sure you pick that up. It's 30 pages walking you through, asking specific questions in plain English, no speaker jargon, no nothing like that, which are really asking you, how are you going to organize yourself? How are you going to get set for your event? What do you need to have in your presentation? A lot of the structure of what I'm going to talk about today, you will also get out of that perfect preview organizer. So I know I talk about it a lot, but if you haven't received it yet, it's totally free. Go pick that up, exploremomentum.com/preview. I'll reference the specifics about what that is, and I'm going to be talking about that because like the whole middle of that perfect preview organizer, if you don't have your PowerPoint, or you haven't started, or you've never built a presentation or something like that before, that's exactly what the middle of that document does for you. It says, all right, here's the points that you're going to teach, here's how you use them. So if you don't have that, make sure you go pick it up, exploremomentum.com/preview. I'm going to jump into this. Julia, welcome. Thanks for being here. As always, I appreciate you being such a great follower. Anybody who's watching this again, please let me know that you're out there. I definitely want to know that you're here. It helps me. It keeps me going. And so let's move into that. Let's talk about presentation do's and don'ts. And I did have PowerPoint in parentheses here because I will use those words interchangeably. I use PowerPoint for my presentations. I make a lot of these mistakes. I have a lot of these issues. You are not alone in these issues, so I definitely want to be clear with that you are not alone. Everyone who does presentations will have this issue eventually over time, where some of the don'ts that you'll see in here, these are things that I commonly fall prey to, and they're things that whether you're a new speaker or you're an experienced speaker, you're going to run into. And so I definitely want to make sure that your PowerPoints, your presentations are solid, and you know how to structure them. And again, that perfect preview organizer, if you don't have it, make sure that you grab it. Why is that? There we go. I was like, why is it showing my taskbar? It wants to show you what time it is. All right. I know what time it is. My name's Ken Kors. For those of you who have never seen an episode of this, I know, again, thanks to all of you who've been sharing this. I've had people come to me from many different Facebook groups, people who I've never met before, telling me they spotted this episode somewhere, as well as those of you who are members of the Your Momentum Now group. Thank you so much for spreading the word about this show. Feel free to throw me those likes, comments, and shares. But I have heard that many of you have been doing that. So I've had many of you watching this. So I know some of you might be new and you're like, who's this Ken Kors guy? What's he all about? Why does he talk about this stuff? Because I've been in this industry a very long time. my teams and I and companies I've worked with and partners and many different projects I've worked on have amounted to something around the tone of $50 million in online sales, variety of different industries. I love the speaking industry in particular. As you can see, I'm willing to sit in my room all the time in my office giving you this content. So clearly it's something that I love. I love to talk about this. I love to make an impact. And really, when it comes to the speaking industry, especially right now with how much things have changed and things are changing, it's an interesting time in the industry. And so I definitely want to help guide people through that and let you know what I've seen that's changed and what's working and what's not working. But I've been in this industry a long time. That's why I talk about this topic. So if you don't know me, this is where you get to know me. And then I do talk fast, so I let people know that all the time. I don't slow down. If you want me to repeat something or clarify a point or you have a question, please make sure that you let me know in the comments. Again, whether you're watching this right now live or whether you're watching it on the replay, Julia, it's her cue for her comment, which I know will show up in a few minutes, that she'll breathe for me because I talk fast, because I'm excited. I am so excited, and I just can't hide it about your PowerPoints. Okay, maybe I'm not that excited, but I am somewhat excited about your PowerPoints so that you can get them right. But I do talk fast, so obviously you don't want to be too distracted. You want to make sure that you stick with me and ask questions, slow me down. I do pay attention to the chat. It's right here on my screen, and I've had people ask me, like, they're wondering if it's really there, and I've always got my chat right here. I'll show it on the screen. In fact, I want to get the new version of Wirecast at some point soon where I can show the comments right on my screen, because we have the technology, but I haven't really used it yet. So that would be nice to have eventually, to be able to do these amazing sessions with you. But the chat's right there, so I'm looking at it. So let's talk about the presentation journey first. Again, that perfect preview organizer I brought up, exploremomentum.com/preview. A lot of that, if you don't have this together, or you've never worked on a presentation, or you've just kind of gone on the fly or done whatever you've done, I want to give you a practical version of what I'd call the presentation journey. This is something that you can read countless books on. You can go to a million different workshops. You can get this information in jargon in many different ways. There are a million different speakers that do this. There are lots of people who like to make this more epic and talk about like film structure or novel structure, like the hero's journey is something you'll hear a lot during a presentation. For me, I find the easiest way to get something done, though, not just understand it conceptually, but to get something done, is to ask plain English questions. And you have to have an answer for each one of these questions. And the flow of your presentation should really follow this journey. It's not going to alter all that much throughout the process. And so this journey is actually really important. It keeps you on pace, it keeps you structured, it keeps you moving forward. And again, for a lot of you who may not understand this stuff, or you're not doing this stuff as often, this is what you really need to know about the process of going through your presentation. So the journey of a presentation, whether you have a PowerPoint or support material or not, is the first thing anybody cares about the minute that you step on stage is, why am I listening to you? So you've got to get to that right away. You'll notice, like, one of my first slides almost right away all the time, and the beginning of my show, there's a lower third, there's me talking, but why am I listening to you? So within about a minute to 2 minutes, I have to know why I'm listening to you. And then the second thing, and these two kind of go together in the early phase of a presentation, why should I care about what you have to say? So, like, it's great that I'm listening to you. Standing on a stage and being willing to speak alone puts you in kind of a unique position, because so many people don't love it. So many people don't want to be speakers. They don't want to get to know those things. They're not interested in taking a stage, but still, they want to know, like, imagine you're walking into a room, and for the most part, even though people are nice and kind, people are kind of sitting there with their arms folded like this, and they're like, all right, what's this guy talking about? Or what's this gal talking about? Why should I care about what they have to say? So those two things have to be addressed early on in a presentation structure. And then from there, great, you've established your cause, you've established who you are, you've established why I'm listening to you. What does it mean to me? So everything you say throughout any of your presentation, any images you use, any videos you create, any words, any text that shows up on your slide, or words that you come out of your mouth, always have to have a very clear link back to the person that's watching you. What does it mean to them to be watching you talk about this particular topic? What does it mean to you, and why should I care about it, and what's the link to me? So a big mistake, and this is one of the don'ts I'll get into later, a lot of people make, is at the beginning of their presentation, they either spend too much time talking about themselves or too little time talking about themselves. and they fail to link things back to why the person is sitting in that room. So it's not about telling your life story to tell people why they get in that room, although stories can be powerful depending on why you're doing your presentation or what your topic is. But for the most part, every point you make from the early part of your presentation on has to have a very clear, what does it mean to me as the viewer to be watching you as the speaker? So I'm listening to you because you have credibility or you have experience in this area. I should care about what you have to say because this is, something that I want to know about my business or I want to know about that area. What does it mean to me, both, emotionally and practically to listen to you? And then you start getting into the bones of a presentation. So what's the promise? You've got to make a promise in a good presentation. So by the end of this presentation, and you can even just use that language, by the end of this presentation, you will know, you will have, you will experience, you will understand. I don't love learn. A lot of people like to use learn as that word. Learn isn't always necessarily something that's compelling to people. I'm a person that likes education and I like to learn, but for a lot of people, they want a result of some kind. They want specific sales. I forgot to turn my music off. Good. Look at me go. Whoops. My bad. Should have told me that earlier. That's what I get for watching it live. My bad. I thought I had turned it off, but I guess I hadn't. I'm not even seeing it on my mixer. My bad, people. So you had the instrumentation going behind me the whole time, which was super helpful to you. My mistake. Sorry about that. But so getting back, restarting the journey then really quickly. Why am I listening to you? Why should I care about what you have to say? What does it mean to me? What's the promise? So what is the promise of this presentation? By the end, they will have, experience, do, know. What will they have that they didn't have before from watching you? And thank you for telling me the music was still on. I did want to party. I always want to party. That's correct. But sorry about that. So, all right. So then what are the steps to get there? So you're going to give me a promise, and then obviously the content that you give me, or the stories that you tell me, or the examples that you provide me, or whatever it is that you're talking about has to help get me there. So if the content, and this is a common mistake I see a lot in presentation journeys, is that a lot of times the content that people teach isn't related to the promise, or the promise they're making is too big, like it's something that they're going to do in the program that they sell you, or it's something they're going to do in the mastermind or the coaching or the training or when you work with them. So a lot of times people will make promises that are too big for one presentation, or the content just doesn't match up. You'll say, like, I'm going to give you 5 things you didn't know about your business. That's the promise. And then I teach 10 things about, something else. So the promise and the steps to get there have to be very closely linked. It's really important for the process to understand that those things have to be closely linked. And so that's what I mean by what are the steps to get there. Who else has done this? So any stories, examples, testimonials, case studies, anything that you're talking about at this point that you've got in there, you need to make sure that you can show somebody else who's done this that's not you. And so a lot of times, again, you can rely on your experience and your story and your stuff plenty. It's okay to do that. But a lot of the times, if you're going to provide stories, examples, case studies, testimonials, any of that stuff, it has to be clearly related to the promise that you make at the beginning of a presentation. So if the promise is, I'm going to teach you things you need to do and not do in your presentation, which is what the promise of this presentation is, then any story I tell you has to be related to that promise, to that goal. You don't want things that are pulling you away. And again, a lot of these things probably feel logical, but I know then a lot of times once you get into the weeds and you start developing the PowerPoint and working on those things, these practical questions kind of slip away. Then what do you want from me? So like, obviously you've taught me all this stuff for a reason. You've made this promise for a reason. There is a next step, whether it's you want contact information, you want me to buy something, you want me to sign up for a program, you want me to do something. What do you want from me? And then why should I? Why should I take the next step? So these are, again, you'll hear this in a lot of different formats. The hero's journey, the tale unfolds. There's lots of different ways to talk about this. I will talk about how you construct your presentation in future sessions. This one I'm really focused on do's and don'ts. But for a lot of you, I know that you may not have done this before. So this is what the journey should look like throughout your presentation. You must answer all of these questions in this order with your presentation or with your PowerPoint. Why am I listening to you? Why should I care? What does it mean? What are you giving me? Like, what's the promise? What are the steps? Who else does this? What do you want from me? And why should I take the next step? And these should be blended throughout your ideal presentation as well. So, and this will be in the don'ts as well. All of these things must be present from very early on. You don't want to waste too much time getting to the promise or getting to the steps. You don't want to spend too much time in a story that isn't relevant to somebody because you haven't established that. So if you can establish these things early on and get them almost out of the way, get these questions answered so that they're not hanging out in your audience or while they're listening to you, it makes a huge difference. So again, if you want this, I talked about the perfect preview organizer, which will answer some of this. You can obviously watch this on the replay. I will send you this slide for those of you who want these questions as well. I'm happy to do that. But this is the journey that you're going to go through in a presentation. But now let's back up even more, and let's talk about just the presentation. So I'm going to move my thing. And so what is the job that your PowerPoint is supposed to do? I would love to know, for those of you watching this live, who are watching me party and watching the music out there, what is your presentation supposed to do? Like, what job does your PowerPoint or your support materials in the room, what job does your PowerPoint have? And I'm very curious to see what a lot of people think about this. And if you're watching this on the replay, before I go into it, your presentation or your support materials or your PowerPoints, or even if you use a whiteboard that sits on the board with you, have a specific job that they're doing. So what Julia said, support your talk, your verbal presentation. Exactly right. Totally agree with that. That's a good answer. I'm going to give another one in a minute here. While those come in, I'm going to give you mine because I believe it has a job. You might have a different way of saying this, but I'm going to give you what I think it is specifically. And so the job that the PowerPoint's supposed to do is a few things. So first, like Julia said, totally agree, it's giving visual support for the viewers to your material. So it's just a visual cue for what you're doing. It's giving you that visual support. So that means you have to use visuals. If it's just text, a lot of the time that's a problem. It's got to provide cues for where you should be in your presentation. And I'm going to give the other side of this in just a second. It's a cue. So keep that word in mind, and notice I didn't use certain other words I'm going to use in just a second. I have another answer, so I want to see what it was. Kim says, the point of my presentation is just to support me in the flow. I want them to focus on me, not the PowerPoint. You can tell Kim has been following me and other speaker trainers for a while, because that's exactly right. Now, she said it in a way that I totally agree with. The point is, it's a support piece. It's not a crutch. And this is the issue that a lot of people have when it comes to their PowerPoints or their keynotes or their presentations, is they're too much of a crutch. So you'll notice I use that word cues because I'm going to give you don'ts in just a second. It gives audio and visual references that adds more depth to your stories, because in any presentation, or whether it's a teaching presentation, a mastermind, whatever it is, you are going to be providing examples and you're going to be telling stories. That's a frequent part of what you're doing as part of your job with the presentation. And so, again, it should be supporting you in that audio visual way. So you want to use plenty of pictures. You want to use plenty of video. So you'll notice for Expert Momentum, it's kind of text heavy. There'll be some images sometimes, but it's because I do want you to focus on my face. That's why I have my video on the screen right here, and I change it around and I move it around, because really what I want you to focus on, the same as in that presentation, is me, not necessarily just on this. So it's supporting me in what I'm doing, and it keeps you on time and it keeps you on track, which is really, really important. Your PowerPoint should not be a barrier to keeping you on track. It shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't mix you up. And so let's talk about the don'ts, because it's giving you that visual support. It's giving you cues. It's got the audio visual that supports your stories and your examples. But what it shouldn't do, and this is what a big issue is for, especially for those of you that are new, be messy or cluttered. It should not be a mess. And I would prefer any time, and I think most viewers would prefer any time, even if it's a very plain looking PowerPoint. A lot of times people get way too worried about the visuals. I'm actually going to talk about that and as we go through these do's and don'ts. But most of all, it has to be clear and concise what you're doing. In fact, people point at Steve Jobs all the time as the master, presenter. And for the most part, his presentations were one picture or very few words with, white text on a black background, and that's all you got. No clutter. Kim is out there. In fact, I want to throw a shout out. Kim, post in the comments for those of you watching this live or on the replay. I know today is the last day. Kim is a major supporter of us at Expert Momentum, and her book, which is now a bestseller about clutter and getting rid of the clutter is on sale. So if you haven't picked that up, get it before it goes off sale. Post that link in the comments and support Kim. She has an amazing book. I bought it. Buy it while it's on sale, the Kindle version, or buy it if it's not on sale. So if you're seeing this afterwards, that's fine too. You still need to get it, but Kim, post that. Don't be cluttered. Kim is the clutter removal queen who talks about that. I will definitely have her on. She's been in the community before. I'll definitely have her on. I definitely want to talk about your new book. So that's a different stream of consciousness about PowerPoints. So you can see me being messy and cluttered right now, but that's important. I want to support Kim. So if you're watching this, please support Kim. Pick up her new book. It just came out. It is a bestseller now. Amazing work. But don't be cluttered. And she will teach you all about how not to be cluttered, because that is not me. It should not be a script. And this is the number one thing I see, especially when it comes to webinars or when it comes to online presentations, is it's not a script. If you're reading from your presentation a lot of the time, it means there's too much. If you're constantly feeling like you don't look at if you're not looking at your slides or knowing where you are, or you're like really thrown off or all those things, then you got a problem. Your presentation should really be rehearsed in your head, or it should be rehearsed literally if you are not that comfortable with it, because it's a cue, not a script. It's not something that you want to be reading off of. You want to be using them as reference points for what you're doing and going in and out of it at this point. But if you find yourself distracted by your presentation or pulled into it too far, then you've gone too far with it. Oh, she's got it right there. Downsizingdilemma.com. So yes, definitely pick up that book. It's I know today, if you're not watching this live or today, then I know it's going to be the full price, but you need to pick that book up if you have problems with clutter. And Kim, as I said, has been an amazing supporter of the community in the show, of the community in this show. So pick that book up, downsizingdilemma.com. It's in the comments, but get that. It shouldn't take away from the focus of your presentation. I've kind of addressed that already, but for the most point, a lot of times, over-designed PowerPoints, too much multimedia, stuff that's too goofy, too much text, all those things take the focus away from you, and that's exactly what you don't want to happen. You want your people to be looking at you. Shouldn't be distracting or annoying. I've actually seen a lot of people and speakers who have annoying presentations, or things that are going on with motion or colors or fonts that are unreadable or things like that. Go basic before you go over designed every time. I would rather see that basic PowerPoint that's just your cue, because again, the focus should be on you, and it shouldn't be ugly. And this is something a lot, again, I would call this the over design thing that happens a lot. Most people feel like if it's really well designed, or if I hire someone or I get a graphic designer or something, that's going to make a great impression. And a lot of times, if it isn't simple, you'll notice that my presentations are pretty simple. It's for a reason, and I'll explain what that reason is tonight. But if it goes too far the other direction, where it's over-designed or it gets downright ugly, like it's like beige with pink text, I've actually seen that before. I've seen one that was blue with orange text before. So if it's just straight up ugly, just go with the black and white to start. Like, go with black and white, maybe change a font. Don't worry about that much to start. You don't have to do that much. It shouldn't be that cluttered. So let's talk about this golden tip, because it's really important. And I'm going to shrink me for a second so that I'm not covering up that amazing golden tip right there. But here is the first PowerPoint do, or the first presentation do, that most of you need to know. And again, I mentioned Kim, the clutter queen, but this is true about your presentation. Almost every speaker tries to do too much. Every one of them. In fact, I've even had it happen on the show. Julia and I laughed about that before when I was doing the episode of the show where I was talking about, organization in your preview events. I knew right from the beginning that my presentation was probably going to be too long, and I have the luxury of doing that on the show, making it a 2-part show. But I guarantee your PowerPoint and your presentation as a whole is trying to do too much. It's the biggest thing that most of us do, is because we believe our information or our value comes out of what we teach, as opposed to the presentation or the examples or the stories or the experience that we have. So for the most part, I can guarantee, even if you've done this a long time, there's probably too much going on in your presentation. You're probably trying to do too much with it. As I mentioned, your promise can't be too big. What you're trying to cover in one presentation can't be too much. And I guarantee that yours is too much, so much so that the first tip I'm going to give you, and this is one that's going to be a shocker for a lot of people, is design your PowerPoint and then cut it in half. Like, just straight up cut off half the slides. If when you get through to the point where you think it's done and you're like, all right, I have 50 slides, cut it in half and go, how am I going to do this with 25? You know, and look at it that way. I know this is a difficult exercise for a lot of you, but the thing I know for most of you who haven't been doing this a long time, or you don't design PowerPoints very often, is they tend to get unruly. They tend to get out of control. A lot of times there's just too much information and you're trying not to do too much. And the other thing that's challenging about that a lot of the time is if you don't take learning theory into account, most people can't absorb all that much information during one presentation. Even if it's a workshop, even if it's 2 or 3 days, for the most part, if you ask someone after a webinar, after a training, how much they remember, they'll generally repeat back 2 to 5 points. That's the average. So you need to have plenty of time, even in a 60 to 90 minute presentation, even in a half an hour, for some example, for some story, for some locking in those points and that type of thing. So I guarantee you probably have too much content. And for the most part, if you can't do this exercise where you look at your PowerPoint and you can start cutting right away, then chances are you're too married to that content, or your PowerPoint is too scripted. So you might need to look at it and say, how could I use this as cues as opposed to feeling scripted? Because if it's feeling like the PowerPoint's distracting from you, then you've got a problem. So cut your PowerPoint in half or more. Take on that challenge of saying, once you've done the initial design, start cutting stuff out, or start using different cues, or start pulling slides out of what you're doing, because I guarantee for the most part, you've probably got too much in there. And so here's some things that will keep you in keeping your presentation as short as you possibly can. Or as, you know, not from getting unruly, which is a big deal. Text should never be under 32 font size. So especially if you're doing a live room, for the most part, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of hotel rooms over the years, a lot of times you'll be dealing with bad lighting, you'll be dealing with bad projectors that aren't that bright, well, things will be hard to see. Your font can't be small. If you're trying to cram so much onto a slide that your text needs to be under 32 font size, you have too much text. So that's a good exercise. And again, if you want to stretch it even further, 36 is great, but 32 font size is normally the smallest things can be. If the text feels crammed, it is. So like if you look at it and you go, wow, that feels like a lot of text, pull that text out or pull some of those things out. It's really important to do that and either spread it over slides, and I'll talk about that in a second, or just uncram it. Mix up elements. So this is, I'm going to give some more do's on this as we go through this presentation, but you got to mix up your elements. So you don't always want to like have the most boring form of presentation is like slide after slide after slide of title, bullets, you know, maybe image, title, bullets, and those things. So a lot of times you can divide your bullets out over slides and you'll see me doing this like with my do's and don'ts. I could have had like one slide that was do's and then bullets, don'ts and then bullets, but you want to mix that up. So mix up your elements, and you want to keep that feeling, and I'll talk more about this as in another one of our do's, that the presentation is moving forward. The slides should be moving frequently. You shouldn't be stuck for any given point, but you want to mix up how you use bullets or how you spread out your slides so that things are going all together. I'm using all caps. Is that something you recommend? No, that's just a stylistic choice for me because I love this font. This font is actually part of my branding. I know some people don't love it. You don't necessarily have to use all caps, but it doesn't hurt. And many presenters choose to do that. It's just a style choice for me because I like it. I know some people don't. Some people are like, oh, I wish it didn't have that. And I'm like, well, I like it. So there it is. And then a lot of times a picture video can tell more than text. It's why I do these presentations as videos. It's obviously if you're standing in a room, that makes things easier. But a lot of times you may just want to have a picture instead of even having the text that would write out the point, or a short video that illustrates what you're trying to do as opposed to that. Because a lot of times your imagery is going to do a lot more than text does. So if you're trying to teach a point, show a point rather than tell a point. Show always trumps tell. And so that is kind of also like a performance rule, but a really important one to remember. Show me rather than tell me whenever you can. So create an experience for me. You know, show me an example, show me a video, show me an image. If you show me, chances are I'm gonna remember that point more than if you just explain it to me. So always show over tell. Really, really important thing when it comes to your presentations. And that's probably why your presentation's too long. So now let's get into a don't, because you don't want to focus only on text. And I know I've hammered that in, but you can mix up your elements in a lot of different ways. And so instead of just using text, again, don't hesitate to use images. Don't hesitate to use video. I know video in some rooms, like in some live scenarios, can be problematic because you got to have a speaker, you got to have, hook into the room, whatever. But video can really help you. You just don't want the video to be too long. I would say ideally, other than maybe your intro video, like if you have an intro video that's introducing you and saying some things that you're not going to say about yourself, you can do that. But generally, you don't want videos to drag on and on and on. In fact, one of the worst things for me is when somebody has a video that's like 10 minutes long and it feels like it's dragging on forever. So your videos should be very short whenever possible. Or if they're not short, they should be proven videos, which means you've shown this in a room before. It didn't bore everyone half to death. Everyone didn't get out of their chair and go to the bathroom. Like, it was an element that made sense based off of what you were doing. And then there are other elements you can use. So you can use charts or diagrams. Charts or diagrams really can help you lock in a point. So, and you can do this in PowerPoint as well, but use elements like that. Break away from the bullets is what I'm saying, and break away from the text a lot of the time. Even to the point now where these days I have a Surface tablet that I'll use when I'm giving presentations, or even on my phone, I have a note. So I have this little pen. So this can be hooked in, and if I'm, going old school tech, because that's what my room has, I'll have a marker board where I can draw on the markers and I can move into that element and do some of that stuff. But you want to use the full range of elements. Hi, Steve. Thanks, Alex. Hi, Alex. I'm not Steve, but I'll take it. So anyway, I get it. It's an inside joke. That's okay. But anyway, so mix up your elements. So use charts, use images, use diagrams, use video, but not too long. Mix it up is what I'm saying. No big, long blocks of text without showing stuff. Really key. So do. And this fits into why you need to use different elements. You got to show the stories instead of tell them with text. And the same thing with your examples, the same thing with worksheets, the same things with anything you want to do. Show always trumps tell. And so this is where your videos and your imagery can become very powerful, especially if you're following my format where I'm saying that you want to create an experience rather than tell them about an experience. So if you're walking them through an example, if you can show them someone going through that example, if you have, someone telling a story about that particular example, or you just straight up take them into an exercise instead where they're kind of working with each other or doing something like that, it's always going to trump you just explaining that thing at this point. And so that is really a big deal at this point, to say whenever you can show something, you want to show it instead of tell it. You want to share it instead of explain it. Always creates a better experience. And a lot of times, again, you may not even need the text. You can just show somebody's picture or show them an action or have a video or a GIF that's playing behind and show the story, because again, that's going to have more of an impact and get them more involved in what's going on. But don't, and that takes you to this point, try to cram it all in one session. And I know this takes you to a bigger place, and I've already kind of brought this up, but this also plays into the cutting things in half. But again, your value as a speaker or a trainer, or in all the things that you're doing, is not necessarily the content. In fact, I would argue these days, for the most part, like there's a million other speakers or trainers. The competition is so fierce in the marketplace right now that there's a million people that you can go learn from. There's a million people that probably train similar or the same things that you do. There is nothing that is so unique that competition doesn't exist. But you also have to keep in mind that that's not necessarily the reason why people are watching you. That's not necessarily why people are sitting in a room with you or connected to you. The competition, or doesn't necessarily matter at that point. There's always going to be something about you that attracts your potential customer, that attracts your potential viewer, or makes people want to work with you. It's actually good that competition exists, because you wouldn't have the ability to collaborate with other people or mastermind or get information with other people if you didn't have that. But also, even more so, that for the most part, people are going to connect with you for you and the experience you create, your experiences, the stories you use, the examples you use. Your style is way more important than your content, which is why I'm so willing to go into this. Don't try to teach everything you know. In fact, for the most part, when you're making promises, especially during a preview event or doing your first events or those types of things, most people try to over-deliver. I am very, very guilty of that myself. In fact, the very first presentation I ever gave, I put this in the email and in the social post I sent out today. I was, my background was nonprofit and academic. So I knew, people value information in those settings. And so I went in going, all right, I have 45 minutes. I'm going to teach a concept. At the time, I was talking about digital marketing and everything I had learned about digital marketing and databases and website development and all those things over the years. So that's what I was there to do. Then, so I literally went, all right, I'm just going to write down everything that I know in a document and then kind of convert it into a PowerPoint about, marketing for this industry. So this was, about 10 years ago now that I did this first presentation. And it was over 100 slides for a 45-minute presentation. And not like the long slides I have now where I'm moving through things really quick and mixing up elements, but it was basically 100 slides of title, bullets, lots of exposition and explanation, very few images. I probably had some because I've always been goofy and like to have elements or funny stuff or things to laugh about. But in this case, I know there was very little that I had in those presentations. And the room looked like I had literally just taken out a shop vac or a power washer or something and just sprayed them in the face for like an hour after I got off stage from that presentation, which to me, obviously, I was paying attention to the reaction, which really helped me refine going forward. But I thought that that's what the room wanted. I thought that's what would make me valuable, was the fact that I'm standing up there giving everything I know about this industry and about what digital marketing, all these things, when in reality, that's just too much. You can't do that in one presentation. You can't do that in one workshop. You can't do that in one mastermind. To transfer that information requires an equal part of content, example, story, and experience. So you got to have all those things. So again, this feeds into, don't try to do too much in that first presentation. Don't try to teach everything you know on one topic in one session. Keep your problems or keep your presentation, your promises more basic in the early phases. As Julia says, gotta leave a little mystery, which is totally true. Most people don't do that. They overteach. I'm guilty of that. That's probably my cardinal sin as a speaker, is I always try to overteach and I always try to overdeliver, which can be a good thing. That's why a lot of people like me. But also it can be a bad thing, because if I'm trying to teach too much, then that means, I'm giving everything away. People don't have any reason to work with me. People won't remember what I'm saying anyway. It's just problematic. So this is the big one, again, for those of you that are newer. You've got to have a very clear next step that is obvious from early in the presentation. So again, whether it's they're signing up for something, they're buying something, they want something, whatever the next step is, everybody knows there's going to be a next step. In fact, I know that's a tip that's coming up. But there's nobody that sits in a presentation room and has an expectation like there won't be something else to do. Like, everybody knows there'll be something else to do. There'll be a next step. There'll be something in particular that they need to do at this point. And so you just need to relieve your own tension and relieve the audience's tension by saying what those next steps are or what those next steps look like very early. In fact, most speaker training I've been to say, you want to make it obvious how they're going to work with you or what that experience is going to look like, whether it's coaching, masterminding, program, trainings, events, whatever it is you do. Within the first 30 seconds to a minute, they should know like what type of work you do and how you do it. And that's got to be very obvious from early in the presentation. A lot of times what happens, and I'm pretty sure that's in my next slide here, I'm just checking real quick, is, people will like wait until the very end. Like, they'll be like, all right, this is the training portion of my presentation, and then this is the sales portion. And so the don't that comes with this is you can't have a hard divide or weird energy between your presentation and your close. And this is something a lot of people do. They go, all right, well, this is the content time. In fact, I'm laughing because a presentation I watched recently, someone kept saying it's testimonial time right in the middle, and they would move to it like it was like, all right, we're taking a break from our training to tell a story, or we're taking a break from our thing to give an example, or we're taking a break from me teaching you for me to sell you something. So it should all feel integrated is what's important, both in your presentation and your PowerPoints, as well as in what you're talking about. Like, it shouldn't be some mystery what you do or how they're going to work with you or how they continue that journey. They should know right away, because a lot of the training And the content that you're going to provide is actually justifying why they need to take that step. Your training, your examples are all going to show why it becomes very obvious that they need to take that step. So there actually never is a divide between when you're teaching someone something or when you're trying to take them into that next step for them. The sale or the offer or whatever it is you're trying to do should just be the logical next step. So if you're giving them 3 tips in the first presentation, the next part should be 10 tips or 15 tips. Hi, Anik. Welcome. Julia says if you want to make sales, you can't give it all away. Totally true. You probably cut it in half. Follow that tip. Always leave them wanting more. Totally. Very true. But you can't have a hard divide or weird energy between your presentation and your close. It's a killer. So a lot of times in presentation, you'll almost see like the transition, like, all right, here comes the part where I'm just going to talk about sales for 20 minutes. That will kill your sales. That will kill your results. Even if your results aren't sales, if your results are sign up or your results are read a book or your whatever the results are, there can't be a divide. It needs to be obvious from very early on what the next steps are or what they're going to be doing as part of the journey. Or you can paint the journey like I did right at the beginning of this, where I say, all right, this is the whole journey. We're going to focus on step 1 or even step 0 that comes before it. So, and I did just mention this, but it's important to show it as a tip. Your audience knows you're going to ask them to do something. There's nobody that sits in a presentation room and goes, oh, I'm not going to be asked to do something. It always cracks me up because I understand a lot of times going to events that are pitch fests or where you're being sold all the time or all that can be kind of annoying or kind of grating, especially if you paid a lot of money to go to those events. I totally get it. But also, there's kind of the inferred agreement that if you like what someone does or you're interested in their content or you think that they can help you, even if they didn't have an action, you as the viewer are probably going to take action to pursue that person. You're going to be like, I like their style. I want to work with them. I want to know what's next. So a lot of times the opposite is true, that you're actually taking away from your audience or you're ripping your audience off in some ways by not being willing to tell them what the next steps are or what the process looks like or why they should be working with you, why they should be doing that. A lot of the times when you're too scared to do that or you're too scared to hold to that agreement, the audience will be confused. And so again, I understand some people are like, yes, I understand I don't want to be sold all the time, which generally means that the presentations aren't providing enough content or they're not giving enough or, they're just kind of empty, is normally what the complaint is about a pitch fest. I've been to events that were fantastic events where all the presentations were very valuable. I did hear pitches from speakers at the end and I wasn't annoyed because I got great information and then I was able to decide from that what my next steps were. But I also knew sitting in those rooms, every single time I'm sitting in a room, I know there's going to be an offer. That's just the way it is. That's the agreement of watching someone speak for the most part, is that there's going to be an offer. There's going to be a next step. Your audience knows that. So a lot of times the tension that exists with you as a speaker, especially if you're selling something, is kind of silly. You can get rid of that right away by just addressing it, by saying, yes, there's going to be an offer. There's going to be a next step. Some of you watching this are going to be really attracted to that, and that's what you want to do. That's what you need to do. So you can play with that a lot of times, both in your presentation and in your structure and in your formats of what you're doing, because for the most part, the audience knows you want them to take a next step. They know that you want to do something. So now moving on from that, don't. And I brought some of these things up a little bit, some of these elements up a little bit, but don't overdo your templates. Have weird font combinations. Like, this is one of the biggest things that I see a lot, and it is kind of painful for me to see, especially for people that are in like the spiritual space or the manifesting space or law of attraction or whatever. Like, sometimes people will use weird fonts that are really hard to read when they're projected on a screen or on a webinar, or really stray too much from black text on a white background. So there have been multiple studies done over the years, marketing and psychology studies, that determine, because trust me, it's big data wants to know this information of what will people read, what will make people stay on a page to read text. So you go, why are books black text on a white background? Why are the majority of materials, why is a newspaper black text on a white background? Why do most, PowerPoints start with that combination? It's because statistically, if you want somebody to read something, if you really want them to focus on it, the best combination, doesn't matter really the reason, whether it's familiarity, whether it's biology, whether it's science, whatever it is, black text on a white background. Or, a slightly, some combination that's very close to black text on a white background. And if you're expecting people to look at it a lot of the time, straying too far from that can actually hurt you a lot more than it will help you. So You don't want to go too far off that formula because it actually makes it harder to read and harder to understand and harder to follow along. So PowerPoints and presentations can definitely be over-designed. In fact, a lot of times, some of the best presentations I've seen are really simple, like they're almost like the default, maybe a font changed or two, PowerPoint template, black text, white background, super easy to read. That's what you want. Otherwise, it's detracting from you rather than helping you. So don't use weird font combinations. It's also why I leave so much space on my slides. This is, again, a personal thing I've learned over the years, that it focuses people in. It doesn't feel as cluttered. It gets people focused on the text very easily and what they're doing. And my decoration, I certainly have my brand colors and my logo on this, which is really important. But at the same time, it's not over-designed. I prefer that simple design. And for the most part, what I found is the simpler it is, generally, the higher it will convert. The easier it is for people to read, follow, to use your cues. It keeps things simple. So don't over-design. It's okay to have cool templates, but don't stray too far. And especially if you're expecting people to read text, it's got to be black text on a white background. It's just how it is. Use slide transitions and animations to support your professionalism. So it's okay to have fades. It's okay to have a zoom every once in a while. It's okay to have some silly transitions and all that stuff. They can be very helpful to you, but don't overdo animations to the point that stuff gets goofy. This is like, I feel like sometimes people have this moment where they start playing in Keynote or PowerPoint and they're like, oh, it can do this and it can do that. And I can have this zoom and I can have this cross and I can have this come in this way and I can have this grow up and I can have all this stuff. And sometimes people are just super wowed by that. They like get into the presentation and they're like, oh, that's amazing. For the most part, it's distracting. When you see those projected on a big screen behind you or a big thing and they're not serving your presentation, or you have like Vegas lights around something or things are flipping all over the screen, a lot of times that looks goofy, unless you're meaning it to be goofy, rather than professional. So it's okay to have some basic transitions. The best ones you can have are just straight up fades or dissolves. For the most part, a good fade, a good dissolve is all you need. You want to make sure that they're set to fast speed so that they come in like quickly. You don't want to have stuff that lingers around or takes too long to show up on the screen. A lot of times, like, that's the most common thing. I'll see somebody on a stage, they'll click and their animations are too slow, so they've got to like look at it and be like, okay, has the slide come up yet? Which can detract from your presentation again. So keep your animations simple, subtle. Don't go over the top with them. I understand when you crack into the animation section of whatever you're doing, it probably feels like that seems super cool. But for the most part, like, look back, good example of this, like, pull out your pictures of yourself 10 years ago, or pull out, like, videos you like watch a movie from the 90s and look at some of the transitions and stuff you had there, and you go, oh yeah, a lot of that stuff that I think is cool now, or that was in PowerPoint, looks kind of goofy, or looks kind of dated. For the most part, overusing animations looks goofy if you're using it too much. Now, you can use them for effect. Like, if you're a more comedic speaker, or you have more energy, or you want to have impact with that, using those things can be helpful. But for 99% of you watching this, it's going to be distracting and goofy if you use too many animations. So you don't want to use that many. Have the slides move quickly to keep the feeling of motion. So you generally don't want to stay on slides very long, and this is why I said a lot of times things that would have been bullets could be broken into separate slides so that you feel like you're moving forward through the presentation. You don't want static or stationary images to stay on a screen for too long. You don't want the slide that sits behind you to be on that slide forever. And if your presentation happens to be like that, a lot of times it's better to just hit the blackout button. It's better to just turn it off if it's not working well for you at this point. Just hit the blackout if you're going to have something that sits on the screen, or you realize that you've got to go on a tangent, or you're on a slideshow, because that feeling of motion, of moving forward, of moving through the content is very important. If you have static images or static text or static slides on the screen the whole time before you, it can create dead energy in a presentation, especially on a webinar. If you're not moving through those slides quickly or cranking through them, a lot of times it just feels like you're dragging. It gets boring. People are seeing the same stuff the whole time. So you've got to keep your slides moving forward. And so, as I said, you can do that with multiple elements. You can do that with images. But in general, you don't want to stay on one slide or on one place on a slide for more than a couple minutes max. I would say 2 to 3 minutes max. You don't want to hang out on slides too long. You want to move forward unless it's a video or an image or something and you're speaking to that, because that becomes distracting, or you'll get this feeling. You can ask people from time to time, just energetically, what happens is people will be like, all right, I'm ready to move to the next point. You'll have some people in the room are like, okay, I get it. I want you to move to the next point. Whereas they're not as focused on it if this presentation feels like it moves forward, or if the visual material doesn't feel like it's just standing still. Because then I go, all right, there's clearly more to learn about this. I clearly want to follow the speaker. It doesn't mean that sometimes you won't go, the speaker's still slow, or I don't want to listen to it, or, they're being boring or whatever. But okay, I get it, move on. So if your presentation already moves fast, if the way you've set up your materials and your support moves fast and keeps you moving forward, less than 2 minutes a slide, sometimes even faster, it feels like you're moving fast. It feels like you're going through a lot of content. And a lot of times this is how you can do less. Like when you cut your slides, if your slides are moving really quickly, it feels still like you're teaching a lot, like you're moving a lot, like you're moving through a lot of content, which is really important. So don't stick on your slides too long. Then here's a big one. Do not read your slides directly. And then the worst thing you can do, that happens all the time, and I've seen this especially for more keynote style presenters or people who aren't familiar, don't turn your back to the audience to read the slide. I've seen people doing that over the years. I know it's a technical thing in rooms to set up like a monitor where you can look at it, or your computer where you can look at it. Always better if you can do that and have like the presenter view or a timer or something in front of you where you can see your own slides. Unless you're like pointing at something on the slide or referencing something that's happening, like I'm pointing at the base and I'm saying, here's what I want you to look at. That's the worst. Do not read slides directly. Do not turn around to point at your slideshow. That, again, is where you're falling into the trap of your slides being scripted instead of being cues. So you want to kind of know where you are and you want to understand. It doesn't mean you can't catch a glance at it, but if you're having to do that all the time, you haven't practiced that presentation enough, or you haven't rehearsed it. You don't have the content down enough, or you have too much content, too much scripting. You're forgetting where you are. So that's a great sign if you find yourself needing to read your slides or use your slides as a crutch, that you haven't practiced enough, or you're trying to do too much. So that's like the indicator of saying, all right, man, I'm really trying to do too much here because I have to keep looking to my slides, or else I lose or forget, what I'm teaching about. Really important one. This is a big one. Repeat your call to action. So whether it's a website, a price, what you want them to do, consistently once you've announced it. In fact, especially on a webinar, a great tip I've heard is after you give the website or the URL where you want them to go and the price and all that stuff, every slide that appears afterwards should have that URL on it. So if I say go to exploremomentum.com/preview, which really pops up on the screen right there, then I want to have that up every time after I mention it. Now I mention it at the beginning, and it's not really a super hard call to action for what I'm doing here, but I want to have that up now every time I've mentioned it, exploremomentum.com/preview, on every slide I'm teaching afterwards, even if it's not related to the offer, or even if I'm, giving a testimonial or I'm talking about something, so that people know if they're making the decision based off that, what I want them to do, and when I want them to do it. I don't want that information to go away. So you want your call to action to be consistent from the minute you start actually going into, all right, now here's what you're going to do, here's how you're going to take the next step, here's how all these things are going to work. So you got to make sure that's repeated in all the different things that you're going to do. Don't, and this is a big one with your PowerPoints as well, do not talk yourself out of an offer. The worst thing you can do is show your closing slide where it's like, all right, here's what the program is, here's the details, here's the price, here's what you're going to get, and then start teaching again after that and be like, all right, I have more stuff to teach, but that was the offer. That is generally talking yourself out of an offer, or going into, a lot of times, some sort of Q&A that doesn't fit in what you're doing, or just like being that nervous energy that comes in. A lot of times this happens to the people who also have that divide in their presentation of like, it's training time, it's sales time. So once you've made the offer, everything should be supporting that offer, reinforcing that offer, pushing that offer forward, keeping the motion forward towards that offer, but you don't want to talk yourself out of it. So don't talk too long after you've made the offer is the keynote from that, and your PowerPoint should support that. Generally, after you've made an offer, like if you have some more things to like reinforce that offer, at most you might want to have like 4 or 5 more slides or short slides that are again supporting that offer, and each one has the URL or the price or the go to the back of the room or whatever it is that it says on it, because they should be directly related to that offer. You don't want to teach again after you've dropped that offer. And then, huge deal, and this is really where I'm going to close this before I review today, is you should constantly be reviewing and updating your PowerPoints. In fact, every single presentation I did, and hundreds that I did for years and years while I was traveling and on the road, every time there were updates to that PowerPoint, even if it was a word or two or shuffling some order or walking through it and looking at, all right, is this good? Is that good? What did we learn from last time? PowerPoints or presentations are living documents. There is no such thing as one that's like the same thing forever. You always want to be reviewing it, improving it, looking for dead spots, looking for things that don't work, understanding all that. You will be updating your PowerPoints and your presentations forever. And so anybody who's watching this, even if you've been doing the same presentation for years, you should go and update it. Like, look at what is happening, where do I need to adjust, where are dead spots, where do I need a picture instead of text, where could I use some video. All those things are important, and you should constantly be updating. So let's review. I gave you this journey at the beginning. It's going to make a lot more sense based off those do's and don'ts. Your presentation has to do these things. Why am I listening to you? Why should I care about you? What does it mean to me? What does everything you're talking about have to do with me? What's the promise? So by the end, I will have what or experience what? What are the steps to get there? Who else has done this? Why do you want it from me? And why should I take the next step? If you follow this journey and you follow the do's and not the don'ts of what we just talked about in today's presentation, which I know is a lot of information because I always give a lot of information here on Expert Momentum, I guarantee you will get a killer PowerPoint, and I know that it will make a big difference in your results, in your presentations, and in what you do. So I know that in today's session, I wasn't necessarily saying, all right, here's how you design your PowerPoint, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. There's a lot of that, again, in the Perfect Preview Organizer, exploremomentum.com/preview. Go pick that up. Also pick up Kim's book. I didn't put that on the screen, but it's in the comments on the Explore Momentum page. I want to give the correct URL again without screwing it up, but for some reason it's not showing me all the comments. So go pick up Kim's book as well. Why does it do this? All right, it doesn't show me all the comments. It just shows me the order. So I'm going to have to click play. No. Now we're going to do fun things to get it going. So anyway, so go pick up Kim's book. That's there on the screen as well. I mentioned it earlier. I will post it as the first comment so that you can go get that as well. Pick up that preview organizer. Send in your example PowerPoints or send in your presentations. I would love to see those as well and talk about them on a future episode. In fact, that would be a great episode for those of you willing to do it at this point. Send in your PowerPoints or your presentations, and I will give my feedback and what I think about them on future episodes. I love giving that type of direct feedback to what you're doing. And please, don't hesitate to come back next Tuesday here on Expert Momentum at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk about all things speaking industry, all things being successful in the business, all things that can make you known for your mouth in a good way, not in the obnoxious way, because I know that's what you all want. And we will see you next week. Have a great day, everybody.